What's good, everybody? It's the Clown with Cap Show. Rest in peace to the GOAT, the Texas Dolly, Doyle Brunson, the greatest poker player of all time. We have to understand Doyle Brunson came from a different era back in the 60s and 70s when poker wasn't relevant, where poker players were looked down upon. They were looked as like criminals, thugs, whatever you want to call it. But when Doyle came up, dude, he had to worry about getting robbed, which he did. He got robbed at gunpoint a lot of times. So nowadays in 2023, the current poker players now, they don't have to worry about getting robbed. They're more likely playing at a casino with a bunch of cameras. Well, when Texas Dolly came up, he had to worry about all those small things, dude, that we don't have to worry about in today's day and age when it comes to the poker world. But for me, Doyle Brunson, pound for pound, is the greatest poker player to ever live. I mean, he lived a great life. He's a 10-time bracelet winner, back-to-back WSOP champion, dude, 1976 and 1977. I mean, Doyle was way ahead of its curve. I mean, yeah, we see a lot of 3-bets and 4-bets now here in the new age of poker. Doyle was doing that back in the 60s and 70s, and when people would get 3rd-bet by Doyle, they're folding good hands where they're like, oh, Doyle has to have aces here. He has to have kings here. But, Doyle was so ahead where he did that with all types of different hands. 7-6 suited, 7-6 offsuit, just really all different types of hands where people were like, how does this guy do this? What is Doyle Brunson thinking? But when we think of poker, we think of Doyle Brunson, and it's amazing. The legacy will live on forever. And I do think in the future they'll make a movie about Doyle Brunson, which I think they should, right? They should definitely make a movie about Doyle, dude. I mean, it's amazing, dude. I mean, he won so many different games. It wasn't just no limit hold'em. It was 7-card stud, deuce to 7 draw, 7-card Raz, which I don't know some of these games, right? I know 7-card draw, but Doyle just so many different games. But obviously the Cadillac of poker, just like Doyle said in his book, Super System, that's the Cadillac. No limit hold'em is the Cadillac of poker. 2 cards, but I think in today's day and age, I think Omaha is kind of advanced so much more. You get 2 extra cards, so you get 4 cards in the hole. You have to play 2. It's amazing. It really is. But Doyle, he paved the way for all of us, for all the poker players living today, playing currently, whether you're pro or not. Doyle paved that way. Doyle took the hard road to this, okay? Like, Doyle had to go through so many obstacles in his life to become the GOAT of poker, and people think of Doyle Brunson, they think, hey, he's the GOAT. Doyle, he said it before, he said, the key to no limit hold'em is to put a man to a decision for all of his chips. And that's amazing, right? You want to always make them make the hardest decision, right? And that's what Doyle did best. He always found the weaknesses in his opponents and said, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. His instinct. It just, Doyle, everything he did, it was amazing at the poker table. Had the cowboy hat, pocket cowboys, pocket kings. It's amazing, dude, and I love Doyle. We lost an icon, a legendary icon that left, planet Earth. It's sad. That's part of life, though. Death is part of life, but, for Doyle, it'll live on forever. And I think, the current great players today, yes, they will be remembered, but I think Doyle Brunson will be the one guy that they will remember 100, 200, 300 years from now, dude. Like, that's so long away. That is so long. To whereas, current players now, they might win a couple tournaments here and there, maybe even a World Series of Poker tournament, but, Doyle did it 10 times. Not only was Doyle a good tournament player, he was an excellent cash game player, and I think that's where the elite really poker players, that's real poker there, right? When we're talking about real poker, we're talking about, all right, we're going to put our cash on the table, add some chips, and let's play some cards here. To whereas, tournament is a lot different, right? Even though I do think you got to be a little bit more skilled in tournaments, but, let's say you show up to a tournament and you're on a free roll, or you only paid $50 for this tournament, it's just not the same, right? You paid $50, whereas you could have $500,000 to $1 million sitting in front of you in a cash game. It's just different, dude, and I think that's real epic poker there. It's just real poker where it's like, hey, this is poker, cash, everything plays here. Tournament styles just a little different nowadays for sure, but when Doyle came up, we saw him on high stakes poker back in the day, and Doyle was still an old guy, really, relatively. In the early 2000s, we seen him on high stakes poker, and really, we're seeing Doyle just raking in monster pots, like over a $800,000 pot, really a lot of cash out there on top pair. On top pair, Doyle takes it down. It's amazing, dude. It's awesome. But I think Doyle, he's the definition, not just in the poker world, but in life, where it's like, hey, never give up. Continue to go. Continue to follow your passions, dude. Like, just continue. Life is going to move on whether you're going to die or not, dude. Like, straight up. So, might as well just keep giving it your 100%. Get up the next day and go back to the drawing board. And that's what Doyle did, dude. And I just think right now, I just don't want to see this generation and the next generations to come, definitely in the poker world, where they start to take advantage of certain things, might even cheat here and there. But when Doyle came up, dude, it was just so different, man. Obviously, players weren't as good back in the day, and that's why Doyle was just so ahead of the curve. That's why Doyle knew what spots to raise here. In position, I'm going to 3-bet, I'm going to 4-bet in position. That Doyle knew that all the way back from the 70s, dude. That was so long ago. But now poker's just took off so much because of Doyle Brunson. Even though I do think, yes, Chris Moneymaker in 2003 won the WSOP. I think that has a little to do with it as well, with the newcomers. But pound for pound, Doyle, the way he came up, dude, he brought a new wave of generation of poker players. And they were looked at as like, bad people, where nowadays we're seeing guys, who have, great degrees, have masters. There's just so many, we have geeks playing poker now. We have like mathematicians playing poker. We have professors who teach at universities that are playing poker now. That is crazy, right? Who would have thought that? I don't even think Doyle would imagine back in the 70s and 80s, if you asked him then, hey, where do you see poker, in 2020 or 2030? What's poker going to be like between that? Doyle, I don't even think Doyle saw it until it finally happened, and I think Doyle loves it. I think Doyle said, this sport in poker just took off to the next level, and it's continued to grow. It's continued to just go up, and it really gave you the shot where, if you're not a professional, you can still beat a professional, right? In poker, I can't go compete against Tiger Woods or LeBron James. Like, I can't do that. I have no shot. Whereas, in poker, you have a shot. Everybody gets 2 cards face down. So everybody has a shot. But, obviously, Doyle was just ahead of the curve. He was just that guy, man. And I feel like a lot of people feared Doyle. When Doyle was at the table, they look at Doyle and they're like, dang, dude, that is Doyle Brunson, dude. This is the godfather. This is the GOAT of poker, dude. This is the guy who came up from the 60s and 70s all the way to this very day and age until he passed away a couple days ago, where it's just like, dude, Doyle was really that guy. He was that individual. He was wired differently, dude, and people feared him. And I think that's really what separated Doyle right there was the fear factor. People looked at Doyle, Doyle wasn't the type to be like, oh, I'm going to get pushed around, or, these guys are going to outplay me, but Doyle never wanted to get pushed around, right? And that's why Doyle even said in Super Systems, in his book, he said, I want to have, as many chips as a chip leader at the table, especially during a cash game, right? If there's a guy sitting with $1 million in cash, I want to have $1 million in cash. I want to have the same amount, if not more, because that makes that decision a lot more harder. If you're short stacked, so you go all in, obviously if somebody chip leader, has a monster stack, they're not going to think twice. They're going to call your little chip stack, So I think Doyle was excellent at knowing, hey, pot odds here, I'm going to buy him for the most and bully people, because in poker, definitely in Texas Hold'em, aggression wins. That's what happens. Aggressiveness. That's what wins in poker in the long term. Aggressive, bet, right? Yes, there's some instances where you should check, absolutely. But Doyle, man, he's just that guy. He's that individual where it's just like, dude, he is the one of one here. Like, who do you know from the 70s that made it this long in poker? Over 50 years, dude. Over 50. Nobody. There was nobody that lasts that long. Now we do have guys like Daniel Negreanu, Phil Ivey right now that really are, if they continue to play at a high level for the next 20 years, then we could be like, all right, Daniel and Phil Ivey deserve to be in the same class, right? Even though I do think they're great poker players, I think pound for pound they're probably better than Doyle, obviously now, with Doyle being so old and passing away recently, whereas like, obviously Doyle was so ahead of its time. Obviously Doyle was past his prime. Even in 2013, Doyle was past his prime, but still playing that long, dude, that old, like, that's amazing, dude. Like, we won't ever see that again. I don't even think, in the next a couple hundred years from now, there's not going to be a guy that's going to last 50 plus years in poker, dude. 50 years? Like, dude, I don't know what the secret is, Doyle, but he had it. He had it, dude. And I think really Doyle had the heart and the ambition to go over the top, to beat his opponents. And obviously, yes, luck played a factor, not just in poker, but in life. Obviously in life, to be successful, you do kind of have to get lucky here and there. You just have to. I mean, that's just part of life. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. But when Doyle won the 1976 and 1977 WSOP with 10 deuce offsuit, that's where he got it from. He won it with the final hand both years, 1976 and 1977, 10 deuce offsuit, and that was Doyle. And that's why they call it the Doyle Brunson hand. 10 deuce offsuit, dude. And I think nowadays when people get 10 deuce offsuit, they're going to go crazy with it because of Doyle, the legend he is. Shout out to Doyle Brunson. But looking at it, man, looking at Doyle's life from beginning to end, it was an amazing life that Doyle lived. He lived the American dream, became a millionaire, in poker, which is kind of crazy, right? Because in poker, you have to realize you can lose everything in just a couple hours. If not in a couple minutes, dude, you can lose it all. We have to understand there are some guys out there that are putting their whole bankrolls on the table. It's a little different, right? Now, obviously, if you're super, super wealthy, it's just not the same, right? You can call, you can go all in every single time, do crazy stuff. But I just think Doyle even said it best. A man with money is no match against a man on a mission. So I that's great. That's a great quote by Doyle. There's no match with a man on a mission, dude. No match at all. And Doyle was on a mission since the 1976 all the way up. 10 bracelet winner, back-to-back championship, WSOP champion. It's amazing. And the last person to win back-to-back WSOP tournament champion, who was it? It was the great Johnny Chan. Shout out to Johnny Chan. But, the whole poker world is looking at this and saying, hey, we lost the GOAT. We lost the Godfather. Who's going to step up next? Obviously there will never be a Doyle Brunson ever. Never again. So, Doyle, I love you, man. You paved the way for so many young poker players in our generation today. Without Doyle Brunson, no way in heck poker would be where it's at today. There's no way. There's no way poker would not blown up the way it is now, dude, if it wasn't for Doyle. Doyle's impact on poker was so strong, dude, that it'll carry hundreds of years from now. That sounds crazy, right? That sounds like, what are you saying right now? Yes, Doyle changes for so long that centuries from now, they'll look at Doyle, they'll see his picture and be like, this was the Godfather of poker. When fathers and young sons out there, the fathers are going to look at him and be like, hey, they're going to show a picture of Doyle Brunson to their son, and they're going to be like, this is the Godfather of poker, son. This is the guy that paved the way for everybody that are playing poker right now. Online poker, the geeks, there's so much, and poker's just took off so much, where it's like, dude, even in the early 2000s, like, people are like, hey, what's his range? In the early 2000s, people would have been like, what are you talking about, range? Range of what? Like, they would have laughed at you. They would have been like, what are you talking about? Range of what? Range of hands. They're just out of their mind. But now it continued to advance. Eventually we'll be competing against robots and AI, which I don't think is going to be a good idea. Could you imagine betting against a robot, dude, in poker? Like, dude, it's insane, dude. We're all human, but it's amazing. Doyle Brunson, the GOAT. He's the Godfather. He's the best to ever do it, man. So, rest in peace to the legend, the Texas Dolly, Doyle Brunson. He is the GOAT, baby. It's the Clown with Cam show. Let's go!